The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
All right, good morning, everyone. How are you? My name is Donna Baker. I am the University Archivist for Middle Tennessee State University. I work here out of the Gore Center. The Gore Center is celebrating its 25th year anniversary. But we've had Senator Albert Gore Sr.'s papers for many, many years. The center is more than just political papers. We have a lot of regional materials. Of course, we have university. So at some point in the day, maybe you'll get a chance to look around a little bit. But we're thrilled to have you. We're thrilled to work with teaching primary sources here at MTSU. This is our first collaboration, and we're really excited about that. So we're happy to have you with us. Again, my name is Donna Baker. I'm the University Archivist. My lovely and talented colleague in the back of the room, Sarah Calise, is the archivist for everything else. So anything else that has to be done here at the Gore Center, whether it's political or regional, Sarah's doing that work. Let me turn it over to my lovely and talented colleagues. And again, welcome here.
All right, thank you, Donna. So yeah, today marks two firsts with our Teaching with Primary Sources program. Our first chance to work with the Gore Center and their staff, which is really exciting. The other first, this is our first workshop on World War II. And that's really notable because we've been doing this program since 2008. We have done a countless number of workshops. Like I said, this is the very first one we've done on World War II, which is a little amazing that such a popular topic we've not done before. So our plan for today is we are going to be breaking down the day into several different segments, working with both our Teaching with Primary Sources staff as well as with the Gore Center staff, and showing you guys some cool new sources that we found, bringing together sources from both the Library of Congress collections as well as the Gore Center collections, and having you guys a chance to work with those sources, to analyze the sources and discuss them. And we're also going to be demoing a couple of new activities. And as we get to that part in the day, we really would love to get your feedback on them. They're things we have not posted yet to our website. They are still kind of in development. And so you guys are going to be our guinea pigs, and we would love to get some feedback on those. Before we get too far along and kind of start into the meat today, I do want to kind of run through the agenda real quick so you kind of know what to expect as we go forward. We're going to do a little bit of an icebreaker activity here in just a moment, and then we're going to spend some time doing some primary source analysis, again looking at some of those Library of Congress and Gore Center sources. And we'll take a break about 10:30 this morning, come back, and then I'm going to turn things over to our graduate assistant, Ethan, who is going to be sharing this lesson plan that he has been developing with Sarah. They're going to take you through that. We're going to break for lunch about 11:30. And we are going to be giving you guys vouchers to use at one of our campus eateries. Macaulay Dining is going to be the closest one and probably the one to get you guys in and out of quickest with the most variety of choices. And so we will go over there. We'll have about an hour for lunch, come back this afternoon, and Sarah's going to take us through an activity about the role of women during World War II using some of the Gore Center sources. We'll take another short break around 1:15 or so. And then we're going to be doing an activity about Oak Ridge and, of course, the role of Oak Ridge during the war. And then we'll round out the day with some discussion about different resources available both from Teaching with Primary Sources as well as through the Gore Center in ways that, of course, we can be of assistance to you guys as you think about teaching this topic with your students. We will get you guys out of here at 3 o'clock today. A little bit of paperwork to start the day because, unfortunately, that's how we have to start sometimes. In front of you, you have a couple of different things I need you to take a moment to fill out. One is our participant enrollment sheet. If you will, fill this out. Even if you've done this before, if you have filled one of these out for me recently, you can just put your name and your email address. And actually, if you go ahead and put your zip code too, that helps me just because I have to put congressional districts for our TPS reporting. So if you'll fill that out. And the other is a form for the Center for Educational Media. In case you haven't noticed, we've got two folks here with the center who are going to be filming us for today. This is inclusion within their programming, which largely is available online. So there's online PD. So they're just going to be kind of capturing, and then we'll be working with them to kind of edit the film down and make that available. So if you will kind of fill out the front portion of that. John, anything on the back that?
Just the last line.
Just the last line? All right, and then sign here at the bottom. So if you guys will take just a moment to fill those out, and then we'll come grab those, and so get some paper out from in front of you. You also have in front of you our new, we did bookmarks instead of doing rack cards, because who doesn't love bookmarks? We've done 5 different designs, and so of course this will have our web address, and if you're not familiar with our website, Stacey's going to take us through that this afternoon. And then also something new that we are doing, we are part of an initiative called Discover Tennessee History with with several other organizations in the state that do statewide programming. So on the back there, you'll note the organizations and their websites where you can find educational materials. And again, just to kind of help to communicate some of the great resources that are out there for teachers and organizations that are doing professional development in the state. So know that you have those, as well as a pencil that also has our web address on it. So before we jump into our icebreaker, how many of you guys have not been to one of our Teaching with Primary Sources workshops in the past? All right. So just real quick, I am Kira Duke. I don't know if I introduced myself earlier. I sometimes forget to do that. I'm the education specialist with our Teaching with Primary Sources program. We are funded through the Library of Congress. We have had the program here at Middle Tennessee State University, like I said, since 2008, and are part of a national consortium. There are about 25 different programs currently in the country that work with the Library of Congress to be part of this program, with the purpose really to talk about using primary sources available from the Library of Congress digital collections and materials on their website, but then also to talk about generally how we use primary sources with our students. So thinking about strategies for incorporating that into your curriculum. So of course, definitely social studies and history, but then also thinking more broadly about other subject areas where you can incorporate primary sources to enrich your student learning. And then also with our program specifically, we like to think about how we can increase content knowledge so that when you're digging in and you're looking at these primary sources, that you have the background to feel comfortable using the sources with your students. So when they ask, those crazy off-the-wall questions that students will come up with, you feel a little more comfortable trying to answer some of those. So we do both professional development. So we offer generally around 30 workshops a year throughout the state of Tennessee. And then we also create educational materials such as lesson plans, primary source sets, newsletters, those kind of things that I said Stacey's going to show us later that are available on our website. We also will align everything we do with the curriculum standards for the state. So as you guys know, standards are going to be changing next year. We're already in the process of actually updating all of our materials to align to those new history and social studies standards. And I'm about 65–70% of the way through updating all of our lesson plans right now. So that's something that we like to keep in mind and thinking about how we can use these materials to meet what you have to do in the classroom as far as standards. All right, so what we're going to be doing to start with, kind of building off looking at those sources, we're going to be analyzing a different group of sources. And we are going to be doing this using a different form than one that, for those of you who've been to our workshops before, maybe you've used before. This is a new piece that we have been working on, analyzing from the respects of thinking about things from an economic, social, and political standpoint. And we have developed this based off of some presentations and work of Dr. Yorkie Williams. And so you'll note at the bottom we've actually cited one of his books, Teaching U.S. History Beyond the Textbook, which for those of you teaching high school and AP, I highly recommend taking a look at his book. It's a great resource that might be beneficial for you. So to start with, we'll hand these out. So if you're going to take one and kind of pass it back, take one and pass it back. Everyone should get one. 10. Okay. So what we're going to do is most of you are going to have one source. I am going to have one group that's going to have a couple people in it because I have one source that's a little longer. It's actually got 4 pages in it. So we'll have 2 people work on that one together. So you're going to look at your individual source. Again, think about it from an economic, social, and political aspect. All right, so again, looking at your sources. Thinking about those sources and what they say about the impact of World War II, again, thinking about economics, its social ramifications, and political ramifications. Again, what we see within that source.
Standard of living. Wow, this is hard to put yourself there.
1941.
What's happening with the economy there?
Okay, so just a couple more minutes for those of you who are still working, and then we're going to kind of put you guys into groups and kind of do some comparison with some of these. Okay, so what I want you to do in your groups, so there should be 3 groups. We'll have a group that is our political group, we have a military group, and a home front group. So if you will, our political folks, if you guys want to come up here, I think there's just one other source that goes with you guys. Yeah, so if you'll come up here. Our military folks, if you want to go back to that kind of back corner, and our home front group, if you want to maybe, you guys can come over here. So we'll do military, home front, and then political up here. And if you want to stand up, I'll let you guys decide if you want to move chairs around. Yeah, and the tables and stuff have wheels, so again, if you want to move stuff around to make it work better, feel free to move stuff about a little bit. Here, let me shut this out so that you guys don't get blinded by the light. Yes. All right. So what I want you to do in your groups, of course, is to look at your sources, talk about the things that you noted as you were analyzing them, and I want you to think about collectively what you can figure out from this group of sources. Again, thinking about those larger ramifications of how the war was shaping both the country and the world. Again, especially thinking about them through the lenses of your individual groups. So kind of share out your sources, what you...
So I had a letter from a husband to a wife. It was in 1944. So I knew that was towards the end of World War II. And he's noticing that, or he's mentioning through most of the letter that the pay is about to go up. So he says that he's going to get $46 a month.
Though. But we said this last one was definitely like more social than political.
Empire, and it states even there that their giant empire was at risk in the bottom section. On the social, I said it showed a world that was at war.
Women had more roles than they had at any other time. They had to step up.
It's interesting that when the women finished, when the war ended, pretty much most of them were very happy to go back and get married. They had, their attitudes, women wanted to, I'm sure they opened the door, but for other women,
Real powerful out of trouble.
So once you've had a chance to discuss your sources, if you want to kind of move back to your seat, we're going to go through and actually look at all these so you'll get a chance to see all the sources. All right, I'm going to dim the light so you guys can see the sources up on the screen a little bit better. We're not going to have nap time just yet, so... Okay, so we're going to look at each of these, and as we get to the source that you or your partner was looking at, if you would kind of share with us your thoughts about it, and then we'll also open this up for just general discussion as you guys get to see kind of the scope of the sources that we had. So we start with this one, and these are actually in chronological order. So we start with this political cartoon about it's talking about the Neutrality Act. Isn't this what we really want, from 1939? So I think our front table had this source. So what did you guys think about this one?
Did you want us to talk about like what our group said? Or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we had political, and we said that to keep us out of war was very political, and also to curb the power of dictatorships. But we said a lot of this could also be social as well, and economic.
Okay.
So those were the things that we identified as like political, but I mean a lot of it could be political as well.
Can you guys in the back, can you read the text on it, or is... Okay.
I don't understand the part at the bottom, and we'll scrub floors and do dishes in our spirit. Is that because the economy's not going to grow now that we've closed ourselves inward? Do you know what I'm saying? So that our jobs won't get any better or get worse?
So that's a good question. Actually, this is something that Stacy and I talked about just the other day as we were looking at this one. So for those of you who can't read all the text, the top part says a Neutrality Act that will keep us out of any war. The second line will ensure the continuity of American commerce. The third line will act to curb the power of the dictatorships. And lastly, and will scrub floors and do the dishes in its spare time. So what do you guys think about that? What is this political cartoon saying?
I almost read it as a joke. Where, I mean, obviously it's a joke, it's a cartoon, but where it's almost, the author is saying that the top is not completely feasible, so we're gonna say we want you to do all that and clean my house.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's kind of how I read it.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. So the ones that are fleeing are coming here and that's the job so good.
Other thoughts about, you think the message of? Yeah, I read it as kind of also being a joke, because essentially this Neutrality Act is gonna do everything, right? It's gonna keep us out of the war. It's gonna like continue our economic growth. It's gonna stop the dictators, and it's gonna even be able to do our dishes. Like it's gonna do everything for us, which is not really reality. Okay, the next one. This one is really difficult to read up here. This is a speech. This is.
It's a transcript of a radio broadcast that Albert Gore Sr. He used to do a weekly radio show, kind of just updating America or Tennesseans more likely on things happening in the United States and the world.
Okay. So Albert Gore Sr.'s radio broadcast, yeah. So.
Well, I think kind of what we discussed as a group, she made a good point that it kind of almost sounds like as you get to the end of it, like they're kind of pumping you up, kind of getting you ready for it, and kind of thing. The last sentence says America will not prove unworthy of her destiny. So it's we kind of took away. We had economic, social, and political. One of the things that we kind of got from it was just how much the cost of going to war with Japan would affect the economy. In social, we said women may have to take on roles that maybe their husbands previously did, so had more responsibility with their husbands going to war. And politically, just from taking away from the article, almost like the U.S. had no choice but to go to war with Japan.
Okay. Yeah, and the date on this is December 7th, 1941. All right. So questions? All right, so this image.
Yeah, I had this one. Los Angeles, California, a store in Little Tokyo. Things that I put for economics: store closing, loss of jobs, less competition, and lack of choices. So obviously now if you live in this neighborhood and you've lived there for 20 years and you've shopped in this store, now you're losing the store that you've shopped at. What's the impact of that? What's the impact on the owners, the people that own it, work there? Social, I put people losing their source of income, people losing their livelihood. I put, is this kind of a question mark? What does this have to do, or does this have anything to do? We don't really know, but with Japanese internment. Are these folks Japanese? Are they Chinese? Are they, some other Asian ethnicity, you don't really know. So you don't know if this is a direct effect of the Japanese internment or not. And then I put political, just effect of Japanese internment ? So and again, we don't know that, but it probably is, but we don't know that for sure, because they could be going back home. If they're from China, they could just be going back to China, and not because it says evacuation cell. So we don't really know what that means, but obviously this is World War II and probably with Japanese internment related.
Okay.
Okay, this one was mine. What I looked at when we was doing the economic side of it. Well, first of all, it was kind of shows Japan's empire. But on the economic side, I look at it from the imperialistic empire, how, of course, Japan, as they built this huge empire based on imperialism, taking over small areas and trying to take over the Pacific. I showed that, yes, it did make them, on the economic side, a huge economic power in the world. But now, as you in the small corner, it starts talking about how their empire was at risk as the Allies were closing in. Of course, it's going to have an effect on their economy. And also, too, you can see where the American trade route, where the United States was bringing in supplies to other areas in the Pacific. And this kind of shows evidence of how the economics for the United States grew because of World War II. From the social, I put that it shows a world in war, especially in the Pacific, and you can kind of see the war society that was occurring in the Pacific during this time. And then on the political, I put the same thing about the Empire of Japan because it kind of went for both. And I said it also, in the corner, you can read where it kind of shows or lays the foundation for how the Soviet Union and the United States, both by showing the supplies, were going to rise up as world powers after the war. And it also shows United States getting strongly or more involved in foreign affairs and becoming a world power as well.
Okay. Yeah, so this actually comes from a newspaper. This is a great find that Ethan made. I like that, the graphic to be able to kind of show students again that the Pacific theater and to see kind of the island jumping strategy, and you can kind of see how this is kind of mapped out a little bit there. All right, our letter with the Tennessee maneuvers.
Yes, ma'am. This one was certainly, I considered, economic and social. One thing that I noted about this source is that towards the end of the letter, he mentions how he's going to get a raise of $27 a month from $19 a month to $46, so he's celebrating that. And then also at the beginning of the letter, he mentions that he is going to be on KP duty, but he says that he prefers that rather than walking in the heat because this letter was in late June, so it was very hot during the summer. And for the social, I noted that he was a married husband that obviously misses his wife very much because his last sentence that he puts is, "I sure do miss you. Lots of love, hugs, and kisses. Your very lonesome husband." So I noted that the source mentions a relationship between a husband and wife during the wartime as well.
Yeah, and I think the letterhead, with the image there of the Tennessee maneuvers is just really cool. All right, the Wave Rave.
Want me to go?
Good.
You
All right. This one here was is actually a flyer. We researched it a little bit here, and this is one that comes out once a week that complements something called the dope sheet. We don't know what that is, but essentially what this one was talking about was the World War II waves, which is the women in the Navy, and a limited number of the Negro women were going to be allowed to come in and serve as administrative officers, and this would be like the first Negro recruits that we're going to have, and the Coast Guard will follow, and so we felt that was the social side of sorts, and that the political side would be probably FDR seeking more recognition to the women and what he's doing to have women be involved in the service. So we didn't see anything was economic at all, but it's their chance to come in.
Okay.
Although They
So
most certainly were not.
expanding women's roles within the military.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's November of 1944, so it's near the end of the
Towards the
war,
end of
so
the
they
war.
need as many bodies as they can get.
Okay.
I see Eleanor Roosevelt's influence on this decision as well.
Okay. You want to expand on that?
Well, I just think she'd be marching in marches in the civil rights later. You know, she's that type of woman, very strong and very intelligent, and she was always supporting causes that improve lives of everyone.
Okay. Yeah, so having a voice in the White House who was speaking out for expanding the sphere of women's work, yeah, we definitely would be an influencer on the president. All right, Winnie the Whack.
If I can be transparent, I struggled quite a bit with what I was looking at
Okay.
here because I'm unfamiliar with who or what Winnie the Whack was. And then when we got together in a group, we kind of were uncertain as well. My initial reactions before when I first got it was just the different, like the social, the difference between, you see this woman blonde and then the other woman almost appears Asian. And so the way that they're kind of speaking to each other, there might be some. But but then when we found out that it had something to do with the Air Force, we were like, well, maybe that's not at all what we were looking, or what I was looking at, or what we saw. So we actually would really like some clarification on
All right.
how this.
I'm gonna go grab them real quick.
All right. So Sarah's going to go grab. We actually have one of the dolls in the collection here.
So it is a doll. See, when someone
yes.
said it looked like a doll, and
Yes.
we're like, well, maybe it is a doll.
So this
Okay.
gets into kind of that larger kind of cultural influence of the war. So again, thinking about, you know, I like thinking about now, if you go anywhere now, any kind of museum, even if it has nothing to do with World War II, there's almost always something they sell in their gift shop that's like Rosie the Riveter. And so again, thinking about those kind of larger kind of cultural influences that the war had.
You know, I'm not sure if she was actually portraying an Asian. That's just kind of how they drew little doll faces. Yeah. And that's how the little girl was growing up, and look where she is now. That's my thought on it.
They're actually paper dolls.
Huh. Paper dolls.
Huh.
Of course, you would have to explain to your students paper dolls. They probably don't play with paper dolls. Yeah.
Yeah, I brought those paper dolls to a second grade class, and they're like, "How do you play with? They're two-dimensional. This isn't as fun as Barbie."
Yeah. So yeah, so what do you think the larger ramifications of having these like paper dolls circulating? I mean, how is that going to impact the next generation?
It definitely gives empowerment to females, to little girls, to see what you could become.
You know, too, on a social scale, I've been doing a webinar about World War I, and it was did a history from, but you know, one of the guest speakers on there was talking about how in World War I, when the women first started really becoming involved, you know, in the war, that one of the books that she wrote, she was talking about was that the United States, especially the Secretary of State, and I forgot who he was at that time, was saying the Secretary of State was even encouraging the troops overseas to keep the women separate from the men, because the women were in World War I were seen as taboo, immoral, because, you know, the attitude was, well, what type of women would be in war. And then now in World War II, you see them making paper dolls, so it kind of shows how the women's rights or roles is being more accepted in the military and in.
Right, there's been this pretty big shift between, you know, the World War I and the beginning of World War II. What is the other thing that happens between those two? Yeah, so that is one contributing factor. All right, other thoughts about Winnie the Whack? All right, and so this is the longer source. This is the 2 text pages, and this is a pamphlet that the Gore Center has. And so the front piece here is the inside of the front cover. The back text there is the back cover. So we'll look at the text, and then we'll actually look at the 2 images that you guys had.
So these are kind of letters from an assignment that was to photograph the Bomber Command and the B-29. So from a military perspective, they were preparing target charts, maps, and other intelligence for, these missions. We were also, I'm not sure if this is true, but we were wondering if any of their photography was used for like war propaganda. And then they both talk a little bit about just being in India. They were stationed in India, about the tropical climate, and that kind of brings in the cartoons.
Okay.
There are a lot of Indian cultural references. They're shopping at like an Indian market. There's a hookah, there's a rickshaw. I think one of the images is, I think the one on the left is like the squatting the lack of Western toilet. The Indian, the sacred cow for the Hindus in the top left-hand corner. So obviously there's some social impact as well.
Okay. Sarah, do you want to talk a little about this one?
Yeah, so this comes from the Robert Alexander papers here in our collection, and he served in the photo intelligence department of the Army stationed in India. He would do reconnaissance missions, and these 4 pages you have are actually from this booklet here, which is kind of like a summary of what they did between 44 and 45. I can pass this around too, and it goes through different activities that the 10th photo detected in India.
One thing that we really liked about this, one is that, I don't really think of India as a place that World War II had lots of impact. And so to have a source that speaks to, how the war was even impacting the Indian subcontinent, I think is pretty interesting. Because again, we usually think about Europe, we think about Japan, we think about the Pacific Islands, but I don't think about India. So I thought that was interesting. And then within these 2 text pieces, here on the left, how it ends where it says, what we did and what we saw is told in these pages. We did more and we saw more, but censorship in the time of war is necessary. So I thought that's a really interesting statement to have in there to again talk about censorship, war, military secrets, like how all these kind of things play out together. And I think that would be a really interesting statement to have your students to kind of dig into. Again, how was censorship used during World War II? Why was it important? How was that shared more broadly, even within the wider culture? So when we get to like Oak Ridge later on today, we talk about that, how essentially a community was created that was largely done in secret. So I thought that was really interesting. And then here on the other side, so the second part of that paragraph, the transport trip over was tough, but the hot, sticky tropical climate of India was tougher. At first we had nothing. Deep slit trenches had to be dug, quarters prepared, latrines dug, and numerous other company details. A few weeks later, the commanding general called us together, and it was time to commit the new unknown B-29 to combat against the Japanese. We worked that night and day with makeshift equipment and dark rooms to prepare those first target charts, maps, scales, navigator aids, and ditching procedures necessary for air combat. That mission was flown. Since that, there have been many more missions, yielding tremendous destruction to vital Japanese installations. So I think that paragraph is interesting, one, to kind of get into like the full scope of what this unit was doing, the newness of different pieces within, military technology and using, this B-29. I've been thinking about, where were these Japanese installations that they were bombing, where were they at? And how far were they flying to be able to do those runs? So I think those are really interesting questions.
There was a theater during the war called the CBI, China, Burma, India.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if they're going Burma in Chinese time.
Burma, yeah. But again, thinking about, those are usually, I think, theaters of war that are largely overlooked. So again, to get at the global nature of the war, I think these sources do a good job at kind of expanding that for your students. So thoughts generally about this group of sources. you guys have a particular favorite one, or ones you think your students would really get into?
I like the map that from 42 showing Midway and
Okay.
Coral Sea and the Aleutian Islands. I thought it's visual. You know, some had low readers at my school, and they could interpret from there, you know, what their thoughts are.
I teach 5th grade, so this one actually, now that I know what it is,
Yeah.
would be really good for my
Okay.
for my kiddos.
Yeah, the paper dolls. Yeah, I think that would be great for 5th grade.
I think the letters are good too. I mean, it shows life as a soldier. Quite a few years ago, I picked up a collection of 2,500 World War II soldiers' letters. And it's amazing,
Yeah.
the stories that they have in them. And, you know, when you share those in class with the kids and have them share what this person said versus what this one said, what this one says, it brings the war home to them as opposed to just reading about something in the book.
Yes.
You know, and that's what I think is important.
Yeah, and I really like that letter getting, because it brings in that local connection too. So having our kids think about the fact that soldiers were brought into Middle Tennessee to train before they were shipped off, and so that impacted not just families who had, you know, family members who were serving, but impacted, I mean, my grandmother used to talk about sitting on the back porch and watching the troops down on the hill behind her house as they were doing their training runs. So, you know, she was a little girl, and she still remembered that and talked about it throughout her entire life. I think this is just really great stories to kind of bring in and help our students to connect to, again, how this was a national, you know, the nation went to war. It impacted everyone. Other thoughts about this group of sources? You were going to say something.
Oh, no,
Okay. All right, anybody else? So these, so we're going to be able to share all of these, and we really, we started with a much larger group of sources. With World War II, it's one of those almost an abundance of riches, right? There are so many sources that you can use with your students. So hopefully there'll be some ideas you have out of this group, and then you'll see some more later today in the primary source set that we have. As well as we're going to share some at the Gore Center that Sarah had picked out of their collections that will also kind of fit in, that you could use to pair with some of these that we've looked at during this activity. Thoughts about the economic, social, and political. How do you think your students would respond to that type of analysis?
The workshop that was done a couple months ago, you know, we did this, and I know Stacy, I told Stacy I was taking the worksheet because I was wrote on it, and after I went there next week, I made copies of it and I used it, and my kids responded very well to it. They did good, and I even did a post-it note way that we done it. We did it with my 8th grade when we was analyzing the Declaration of Independence, and it went very well, and they seemed like it got into it, was more engaged, and they retained a lot of more information more than would the other way I taught it in the past.
Okay. Yeah, so we have done this a couple of different ways. We did a workshop recently, and it kind of looking at the topic that we were doing, Great Depression, and so kind of thinking about picking apart the causes, and at each one taking a moment to go through and thinking about, again, what are the economic, social, and political pieces that we're seeing here, and kind of mapping that out in Post-its on the wall so that you can kind of track the information as you go along, and then kind of coming back together at the end of it to kind of debrief that and kind of pull apart those and see where your larger trends are. So that's one way to approach kind of using that type of analysis with your students. Again, just a different way to approach doing analysis. We're going to look at a couple of different other ways to approach analysis later this morning. All right, if there are no questions about any of the sources, we're going to take a short break. We'll take about 15 minutes, give you guys a chance to get up and stretch your legs. We'll grab those sources from you. And then when we come back, Ethan and Sarah are going to talk to us about the experiences of soldiers. So if you want to turn the light back on over there.